Hello, and welcome to another episode of Perspectives from the Inform Perspective. We're Penny and Jenny, and if this is your first time tuning in, thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here. This is the podcast where we explore what it means to build thoughtful, grounded communities shaped by our local lives, but enriched by ideas and experiences from around the world. For us, meaningful change starts with listening. Really listening, especially to experiences that challenge or expand our own. Today, we want to talk about something that sits in the background of all our lives, third spaces. And when we say third spaces, what do we actually mean? They're those places outside of home, work, or school where people can come together and connect. Third spaces often grow around shared interests or activities. But just as often, they're simply places where you can show up and be yourself. That might be a youth club, a men's shed, a women's group, a community cafe, or a local hall where people come together informally. When it comes to third spaces for young people, it's worth noticing just how much they've declined. Traditional youth organisations like the Girl Guides and the Scouts, which used to play a huge role in providing these spaces, have seen participation drop significantly across the Western Hemisphere since the 1980s. Even more striking, engagement tends to fall sharply during those tween years, that tricky in-between stage when kids are figuring out who they are. So it makes you wonder, if those traditional spaces aren't as strong as they once were, where are young people going to explore ideas, ask questions, and shape their identity today? With kids facing complex topics earlier than ever, third spaces offer somewhere they can be heard, start building independence beyond home and school, and practice navigating the world in their own way. Third spaces used to emerge naturally as part of neighbourhood life. I remember our housing estate was always full of kids playing out on the streets, running in and out of each other's homes. That kind of easy everyday connection. But today, with so much of our attention online, it's becoming harder to get people out of their homes and into shared physical spaces. Being present in the real world takes time and effort, something scrolling or clicking online rarely requires. Of course, digital spaces offer new and also valuable ways to connect across distance and difference, but they also raise those important questions. How do we ensure safety, and what might we lose if too much of our time shifts online, especially those everyday opportunities to build social confidence, practice communication, and develop the interpersonal skills that come from being physically present with others. And then there's the value of the networks that grow from these interactions. Being around others doesn't just build friendships, it creates a kind of social safety net that quietly supports us when we need it. Humans need humans. Our mental health, resilience, and overall well-being depend on connection, on contact, recognition, and validation that goes beyond the home. We need spaces where we can hang out, form friendships, help others, and simply be present with one another. There's so much to be gained, yet somewhere along the way, many of us have forgotten just how valuable community involvement can be. These spaces support intergenerational connections and show us how we fit into something bigger. They remind us why it matters to show up, contribute, and play a part in the world around us. But as we touched on earlier, third spaces have definitely changed in recent years. And of course, we can't ignore the issue of funding. For community spaces, especially those aimed at young people, resources have often been tight. In the UK and beyond, youth clubs and other shared spaces have historically been underfunded, surviving on short-term grants or goodwill. There are signs that funding might be improving, but is it enough? Is it sustainable? And are enough people willing to step up and make it happen? And then there's the question of value. How do we really measure the difference these spaces make? With so many empty or underused properties in towns and cities, could some of them be revitalized as hubs for connection and creativity? At the Informed Perspective, we've noticed another challenge. People want to connect, but many feel busy, stretched, stressed, or unsure. And there's often a worry that joining a third space will mean taking on one more thing in an already full life. So what does a third space actually need to look like today? Could participation be more flexible, more individualized, so people can give as much or as little as feels meaningful? Maybe one person bakes a cake every week but never attends meetings. Maybe another offers their garage for meetups. Maybe someone else shares a hobby with the community. The possibilities are wide open. Could it be that if we let participation look different than it did in the past, we'll start to see the benefits, that third spaces really can be pretty cool? Could they help improve inclusivity, strengthen connections, and help us understand our neighbours and ourselves a little better? And what about impact? Often it isn't immediately visible. You can't measure the moment a young person feels less alone, gains confidence, or starts trusting others. But those moments ripple quietly through lives. Could it be that third spaces work best quietly, preventatively, building foundations for well-being long before crises emerge? As we think about these spaces, maybe it's worth pausing to remind ourselves what really matters, the value of investing in people. Today, we're going to hear from our guests, each of whom is involved in creating third spaces in their own unique way. But before we dive into these conversations, here are a few quotes to set the scene. Maria Avgatides in Ask a Matchmaker. Then there's the technology that took vibrant real-life communities of the past and siloed them into isolating digital spaces. The conversation might be lively online, but many of the people talking are sitting alone in their homes, instead of, as Ariel from The Little Mermaid sang, where the people are. Richard Sennett in The Fall of the Public Man. Public spaces are where we practice being human. The informal exchange of words and gestures teaches us civility, empathy, and belonging. And Kate Rayworth in Donut Economics. The economy should be built around people, not the other way around. And people flourish when they have places to meet, talk, and belong. And attributed to Mike Short, the head of local government and education from Unison. Put simply, austerity doesn't work. Years of cuts have hit communities hard and left vulnerable youngsters high and dry. When youth services are axed, there's nothing positive to fill that space. And finally, I couldn't resist, from Mother Teresa. Today, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. And on that note, I'd like to pass to Jenny to introduce today's guest, please.
Thank you, Penny. And this is a topic that's really close at heart for us in the work we do with Tween Talk, and it's great to connect and, share this topic with the people we've got today. So first up is Paul, who's the co-founder of Moo, the social space with a social impact, giving teenagers incredible venues where they can be face-to-face with friends. Former managing director of the UK's biggest advertising agency, Paul has put the corporate world to one side and teamed up with Cheryl to provide inspiring social spaces where this generation of young people, isolated by social media and bereft of places on our high streets, where they're welcome to hang out, can come together, connect, and build their social confidence. Moo's innovative business model blends membership subscriptions with private and community hire, and their pilot venue opened in Queen's Park, NW6 in April 2025. And Sophia is an award-winning youth activist, speaker and lived experience consultant, focused on social justice, mental health and inclusive public policy. Most recently, Sophia was appointed as a youth collaborator to the UK government's National Youth Strategy, working alongside leading policy professionals to ensure meaningful co-production with young people across England. She is also a regular speaker at Cheltenham Science and Literature Festivals, where she creates events for VoiceBox, a space programmed by young people that platforms conversations on mental health, identity, and social change. Alongside her advocacy and campaigning, she holds a degree in European politics and German from the University of Groningen in the Netherlands, which informs her approach to creating more compassionate, inclusive public policy. And Janine is a journalist, media host, writer, and mental health advocate with a lifetime of lived experience. She founded the Outside the Box Institute, creating tech-free spaces that nurture mental health, creativity, and social connection. Janine is the author of Better Humans and Get the Funk Out, Whatever Happens, What to Do Next. On her weekly show, Get the Funk Out, on QUCI 88.9 FM, She talks with guests about resilience, personal growth, and navigating life's funks. Off the mic, she tries to balance life with guitar, yoga, and riding her free wheel motorcycle, though she happily considers herself a work in progress. So let's get the conversation started, Penny.
Amazing. So I'd like to go to Sophia first today. Thank you so much for joining us, Sophia.
Thank you for having me.
You've achieved so much in youth activism and in policy work. Can you maybe take us back to a third space where you felt really, truly heard or empowered as a young person? And from that experience, can you share how third spaces can make a real difference in fostering creativity and confidence in young people?
Okay, it's a great question. And I was thinking about this, and more kind of recent ideas sprung to mind. So, for example, Voice Box at Cheltenham Science Festival, things like that. But I wanted to challenge myself a bit and think of maybe one of the first spaces that I really felt kind of accepted and kind of, yeah, the first experience that I had of that, or one of the first experiences. And I think it would be brownies when I was younger. So I used to be a brownie. And I used to go to the local church hall, even when it was freezing, in my little uniform. And I went because two of my closest friends who were at school with me also went, and one of them lived on the same road as me. And I thought it would be a really cool kind of a cool thing to do. And I learned so many things there. I went on brownie camp. I learned how to braid hair. I made friendship bracelets. I collected badges. All of these things. It's filled with happy memories. And just kind of places and spaces where I was really allowed to just be a kid. I think especially at school, I was always quite high achieving, and I think having a space outside of school where I was actually just able to just play and do daft things and have fun was really important and really meaningful to me, and had a big impact on me. So yeah, I'd say brownies.
Do you think there's something to be said that, we show up in different spaces in different ways? And I think, I'm curious that, in the third space, that in the school environment, in the second place, you're often seen in a certain light, or you feel like you have to fulfill a certain role. And maybe that in that third space, you can become something else.
100%. I recently heard a fantastic speaker. She was talking about kind of like bringing your authentic self to work and navigating the workplace as someone with kind of complex identity and diverse ethnic background. And she made a point that really stuck with me. So I think a lot of stuff on social media at the moment is kind of saying like, be your authentic self, bring your whole self. And I think there's a very, very important point in that. But it's also, we also have to acknowledge that we can't do that all of the time because it would just be exhausting. And it's okay to have different elements of yourself and your identity that are allowed to shine in different scenarios and different settings. Like I wouldn't be the same person with my family that I am with my friends. So these just kind of like subtle shifts, I think, are really important, and we should have enough spaces where we are able to kind of nurture all of these different versions of ourselves, rather than just kind of having one that we always go back to at work or at school or at uni. Yeah, that's why third spaces are so important.
And I love the example of brownies, because it's like something that we're very conscious of and passionate about. Is a lot of the third spaces can be sport or skill based. So brownies is something you don't have to be good at anything. So for anyone listening that's not from the UK, brownies is like the first step towards Girl Guides, and it's like from 4, is it, I think. You start And it's, you know, uniform, but it's very much like you learn the skills, and very broad, and, you know, similar to Scouts, but the girls and Cubs, the girls version. And it's you know, and to your second part of your answer is as well, what resonated with me is that if we're only able to show up in the home and school, for example, or these ability-based spaces, then there's always going to be these restrictions, for want of a better word, or these expectations, or this performance there, or the, you know, like confines of it, not to sound too negative, you know, especially in, you know, in education, it's all attainment based, because that is what you're there for. So it's really important just to have that space where you can just be, like you said, and explore and discover new things.
I wanted to ask you, Sophia, about the UK youth policy that you've recently written, you've been involved in, and you've also wrote a really nice foreword on it, which was really struck a chord with me, because it's a lot about how, you know, you align the schools, the community, and the health provision around this shared well-being outcomes. In that report, there's mention of these young future hubs. Can you tell us a little bit about what this is and what your vision is, how these can be integrated into the communities?
Okay, so firstly, I'm not a DCMS person, so I'm not a government official, so I will try my best to explain, but please don't hold me to it. So the idea behind Youth Futures Hubs is that they are kind of almost like a center point that young people can go to get information, and kind of brings in a joined up element of working that I think is lacking quite a lot at the moment. And that's where young people fall through the gaps, because a referral isn't made, or someone leaves an organization and the new person doesn't quite pick up where they left off. That's where young people fall through the gaps. The idea behind these hubs is to have central spaces where young people can get information about careers, about digital well-being, about mental health support, in one place, and kind of local to them, or local-ish to them, place-based in their communities, with local people as well, who have knowledge of the local area, who know the kinds of things that go on, and just really kind of centralizing things in a devolved way, which is actually a contradiction, which doesn't make sense, but essentially just bringing things to young people and meeting them where they're at is my understanding. But
Sophie, are you seeing the youth wanting to be involved in this and have a greater voice within their communities, or are you seeing there is a bit of a sort of standoff? Because I'm quite interested to sort of see how that's evolving, because we've spoken earlier about how the youth clubs have kind of fallen out of favor in many ways. What's your own experience from that?
It's a really interesting question, and a discourse that I'm quite invested in. I guess there's two sides to it. There's a side of being quite privileged and having a decent amount of access to these spaces where I can use my voice, and I know the basics of how politics work, and I understand systems, and like that I know that I want to change them, versus people who've been failed by the systems time and time again and have no hope left in institutions in themselves, and kind of think, well, there's no point. What's the point in me voting? Because nothing will change it. These are kind of things that you hear a lot. And I also don't think it's as black and white in that. I think there's a lot of nuance kind of in between those two sides as well. With young people, there are a lot of young people who, as is, I guess, with every generation, kind of really wanting to change the world. And I don't think that's something to kind of downplay, like, oh, you're young and naive. Surely we need more of that. We need more young people with hope and grit and determination to change stuff. So there's some fantastic, amazing young people out there who are shouting out about the things that make them angry and are being heard. And then, of course, there's young people who for whatever reason, don't feel represented, don't feel seen, don't think that there's a point in them getting engaged. And some of the work that I do is kind of trying to plug the gap almost and find these young people and help make not even politics, just like civil society more accessible to them.
And having the confidence to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of it is about upskilling young people and giving them the skills and the confidence to be able to enter these spaces. And like, it's similar to when like kids are really young and they just say random stuff and you kind of think, oh, that's embarrassing, but it's fine. They're young. And then as they get older, they kind of lose that and become kind of more know what to say in socially acceptable situations and things like that. And it's almost like rediscovering that and teaching young people, okay, there's certain situations that maybe you can't say this or you can't do this, but also to have the confidence and self-belief to be able to stand up and be like, actually, that's not quite aligned with my values. And also being like different ways of how to do that. If you don't want to be the person to stand up and speak, there are loads of other ways to get involved which aren't as kind of front center stage.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Sophia. What sort of suggestions do you have for somebody who might potentially say, you know, they're feeling a bit isolated, but they would like to be more involved?
Oh, there's so many things. Things that have helped me, I guess I can talk from personal experience, getting out in my local community. So things I will do is I'll go for a walk and I'll say hello to every single person that I walk past. And it is so scary because some people are listening to music or on the phone or just don't want to say hello to you. And that's fine. And it's almost like this kind of mini rejection therapy exposure where it's like, I'm going to say hello. And it's okay if people don't say hello back to me. And it's equally as okay if I end up engaging in a really cool conversation with people. Especially as obviously I should caveat this, that especially as a woman, it's incredibly difficult to know and navigate these interactions with strangers and to know when they're like, oh, people are brilliant and there are so many good people out there, versus are these questions a little bit too intrusive? Am I sharing too much? And I think that only comes with experience and with surrounding yourself with people who will reinforce your boundaries and remind you of your boundaries, but also give you that space to be like, I'm going to try talking to this person today. I see them, they're a regular at the gym, or I bump into them on the school run every day. I'm going to try and give it a go and see if I can make some kind of connection there.
Which is in essence what the third spaces are providing, right? So that kind of hopefully that safe space where you can experiment and can try and put your point of view across and listen to other people's point of view.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think these spaces are really important to also, I feel like as a society, not even as a generation, like as a society, we've forgotten how to disagree respectfully. Like everything just has to be, everything's a big deal or like a big drama. And there are, of course, fundamentals to people's values that shouldn't be compromised. But at the same time, it's okay to disagree with someone and to have different opinions and to still acknowledge that you can coexist peacefully. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance and it's all very complicated, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
Janine, would you like to add something?
I would. Sophia, I love what you were saying. I started thinking about how in third spaces, for people that are socially anxious, it's so hard to connect and communicate. But when we give people an opportunity to play, maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's painting, knitting, whatever it is, a tech-free space, it becomes a more relaxed place of less stress. You're not performing, you're not trying to achieve, you're just being human.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's something really powerful about like stepping away. As much as I love technology and I think it's incredible for creating starting connections. I think there's something really powerful about just kind of going back to doing stuff with your hands and sitting and being bored for a bit and not constantly checking your phone. And on social media recently, there's been a real resurgence and people kind of embracing analog living, and going back to writing letters, sending postcards, painting and doing jigsaw puzzles, and kind of having like granny evenings. And I do the same with my friends, and it's lovely. Obviously, we still go out and we still text and we still call and do all of that tech stuff, but it's nice to have that balance of like, okay,
Yes.
we can be creative
and making more intentional quality time, isn't it, really? I think.
Yes.
And like you said, Sophia, it doesn't need to be like the rejection, like you said, simply going for a walk and looking around. And as you were talking, it made me think that accessibility is so important in terms of, you know, making it available, getting people to go, but something around this locality. And we sort of said I thought of like bringing back like the high streets, and Paul, you might touch on this when you talk earlier. It's bringing back the high streets, but actually it's not about bringing it back, it's getting out into it. And even if you go out into your local area and realize what's not there, like that could inspire you, or realize the cafe that you might just think does certain cakes and rubbish coffee, but actually you go in there and what else does it have to offer? And it's not about, you know, just linking it back to like leaving your phone at home and doing that. You're just looking above what we've all been sort of comfortable doing. And, you know, I think once you start to look, you discover things, and it inspires you. You'll find ways that you can get involved. And, you know, social media and obviously the internet are great ways of connecting with what's out there. But sometimes I think I've learned this living here in Warsaw. There was the Financial Times once quoted it. It's not my daily read. But Warsaw is a shy city, and unless you go through the door, you don't know what's there, because the architecture isn't very inviting or inspiring. And it's made me realize until you go in somewhere, you don't know what it's got to offer. And I want to take that forward with me. And it resonated when you spoke.
It's the same though about like, you know, talking to somebody and, you know, not judging a book by its cover, right? Have that conversation. You might actually be really surprised what someone has to say and can open another door for you. Paul, I'd love to move on to you now. What problem, Paul, were you actually trying to solve when you first imagined Moot, your new use space in London?
It's a good question. Well, I mean, and it leads very well off what we've just been talking about, which is the problem was one of teenage loneliness and isolation. And as is often the way with these things, it started off with something quite personal. When my co-founder of Moot, Cheryl, and I first had the idea for it 3 years ago. We both had kids heading towards teenagerdom, and as we looked over the precipice of adolescence with them, it all looked distinctly bleak. And to this point of going, I think it sort of reached peak bleak when we first started talking in 2022. But, you know, a generation that's swallowed up by social media largely, and that's not their fault. That's our fault. We designed them, we put them in their hands. So swallowed up by social media, and then starved of anywhere to hang out together in any of these third spaces that we're talking about. And it's really interesting hearing Sophia talk, and then you mentioned about how the architecture is maybe not overly welcoming in Warsaw. I mean, I'd say the signage in London that says only 2 teenagers at any one time in this place, before you get to the windows and the architraves, there's just a sign that says you are a pariah set and you are feared and not welcome here. And I don't think there's any other sort of shop signage that allows such sort of naked age discrimination as it does against teenagers. So the problem we were looking at is a generation of teenagers who are evidencing record levels of suicide, self-harm, depression, social anxiety, and are kettled up in their bedrooms alone and socializing in a sort of digital by default way. So that's what originally the problem. It came from quite a personal one of us with our own teenagers, but looking just out, and the conversation from all our colleagues, parents, was around the same thing. Going, I don't know. They seem to be very unhappy. I would love to get them out of their rooms. I'm terrified for them actually to go into the real world. And even when I look out there, I can't see any spaces left for them in which they're genuinely welcome, safe, and vaguely inspired, as a pretty low bar.
Yeah, that's huge, and somewhere to continue conversations as well. But obviously, it was quite a bold move, though, Paul. Like, and the present, economic climate and everything else. What fears did you have? Any fears at all? Like, starting with this project, and what really convinced you that it was still worth doing?
Yeah, and I wouldn't annex my fears to the past. I think I still have we still have lots of fears at the moment. We've opened up one pilot venue to try and find a new way to fund a venue that's dedicated to teenagers and gives them somewhere to go. So yeah, lots of worries, and I think primary amongst those is always. I think our biggest fear was actually trying to design something for teenagers, and then being very aware that we are both 40-something adults, and the worst thing you can do is go, and look what I've bequeathed you. I've designed something by 40-year-olds for 40-year-olds. So I think, as well as many of the very real financial fears that come with taking out a rent and doing anything like that, I think the biggest thing was, right, how do we create something that is genuinely will be compelling enough and desired enough by teenagers for them to want to be there. Because if they don't want to be there, then there's no point. There's no point even starting, right? And because versus what our options were when we were young, mine was a really crap. I also had a great time at Scouts, and then went to it, which was also in a slightly crap sort of church hall but that was fine because I didn't have very compelling alternatives. But this is a massively compelling alternative. So you better create something bloody good if you want somebody to be, to your point, I think the language you said, coaxed out,
Yeah, but I wonder if that's where the fear is coming from, that a lot of adults see that there's something that they would like to do, but there is a certain fear that we can't make it enticing enough or exciting enough, or what are their needs? And Jenny and I are often also talking about that. It's a lot of what we as adults think our children need, and and especially around the online conversations as well. It's like, they need this, they don't need this, but are we actually asking them what really matters to them? So I think that is also that generational thing, and it's interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I think that there's only one way to answer that, right? Which is what, when we set out on this, and I worked in advertising before. I had either this epiphany or midlife crisis, depending on your perspective, and set out on this journey. And we did a lot, in that we used to do a lot of advertising for PlayStation, youth brands, and things like that. I was very aware that if you want something to resonate with young people, you sure as hell had better co-create it with them, right? Because you can apply empathy all you like, but to that point of, let's not treat just as like naive young people. Let's just go, right, let's build this with you. So when we built and created Moots, we invited 20 teenagers from Queen's Park in northwest London to come in with us with something that was moderated by this incredible young architectural undergraduate from East London, so that it wasn't just two ghastly old people trying to moderate it, and said, look, what do you actually want and what you need? And the answers were really surprising. And it's and you only get that insight if you genuinely sit and honestly engage with it, and honestly listen to what they say, and don't just sort of do it as some sort of tick box exercise that everyone feels better about, but then still goes to design a 40-year-old hangout space.
Yeah, we had similar when we were can't say we were designing our Tween Talk space, because it's called a barak in Polish, which translates to tin shed, and it's 100 square meter tin shed. But we do have we are able to do stuff, and we kind of put it to a vote, idea generating, put it to a vote, and we were pleasantly surprised. Thank goodness they prioritize some of the sensible things, like chairs and flooring. The flowing wish might not come true because it's actually ruined, but this isn't time for me to
Disclosure.
it's also it made me, we were surprised that they didn't. We even suggested a screen for like movie viewings, and they're like, "I want a screen." We were like, "Oh, okay," because they kind of got that at home, and actually it's a time for them. And this, I was thinking, oh, a bit of a challenging thought, but it's like, do people, not necessarily young people, but if they haven't been used to this space outside of their routine, know what they want, and I think until you are putting them in it, and as you sounds like you did, Paul, they're not going to be able to imagine it. And if you think of surveys or youth voice stuff, and Penny and I have been trying to research recently, like what voices are there out there from the youth that aren't about specific topics? And Sophia, please send us in the direction of anything but like just kind of holistic living. It's going into the needs, which is so important and vital, but actually like the essence of what they want to do with their weekends or their evenings, and it's often overlooked, and I think we need to get them in these spaces and learn together.
I sorry.
No, go for
Yeah,
it.
I think you make a really good point there. Some of the conversations that I've had have been with some really much more knowledgeable people than me. Talking about kind of, I guess, the psychology behind it, and similar to like how you would design like a child's playground. What you'd do is you'd put loads of stuff in a playground and see what the kids play with. And that's what you would have more of. So there is an element of kind of seeing what happens. And I guess in this risk averse society, I can imagine that's like some people's worst nightmare. But there's also that a very valid point that if young people don't know possibilities because they've never been allowed to do stuff, or they've never been told actually this is something that you can do, if it hasn't been accessible to them, how do they know that they can do that? How do they know how to behave in those kinds of spaces if they've never been in those spaces before? Yeah, a really interesting thing that I think about a lot.
And also just putting their voice forward. I think a lot of the time there's that reluctance just to sort of say, my voice means something, can I actually say something and be heard?
Good old suggestion box, or the scraps of paper that you lie around and say, write what you think or what you want.
That's true, though. That's what a lot of them do, don't they? It's the easiest way to articulate it. Paul, do you think, just one more question for you, do you think that youth clubs should have statutory support, like a library or a school or a library, or rather than self-funding or goodwill?
Yeah, that's a very big question. Do I think they should? I think that, yes, I think they probably should, because I think a society that doesn't have some sort of statutory support for its young people outside school is a society that's is neither going to be functioning nor happy. So yeah, I think they should. Now, do I think they will? No, and there have been historically times when there has been there has been statutory support, but I suppose I'm, yes, in a sort of utopian world, yes, of course I would. What I'd really like more, I suppose, is to see a more innovative approach to how you can provide these spaces, and a much more holistic way of thinking about it. And so, yes, there should be government funding, and charitable funding is great, but they're both precarious and go through peaks and troughs depending on socioeconomic ups and downs. So I think the thing I'm most passionate about is going, yes, and what else can we do, and how else can we find things to supplement that, and to not just go back to all the traditional things that are going, because for 100 years we've relied on local education authorities or governments or kindly benefactors called Clive who made some money and would like to, fine, but it's manifestly over the past decade that model is not working, and that doesn't mean there's not some amazing people doing brilliant things within the very difficult constraints of that model. And it's not that there aren't really interesting things happening. I think Youth Futures Hubs, there's lots of good stuff around that, but I just go, there's so much more. And in nearly every other sphere of life, we go, right, well, let's find other ways that either there are commercial businesses that can supplement it, or joint ventures, and I think we just need a lot more innovative thinking around it. And to go back to Sophia when she said, about the thing about being, young and naive, I think like naivety is the catalyst for innovation, right? So I'd much rather have these conversations with young, brilliant, passionate people in them who can not immediately go, well, we did that in 1964 and it never worked then, so we should definitely not try that again. That would be cool.
Yeah, and what comes up for me as well is sort of thinking that attaching importance and value to people who are involved in social work, in youth services, sort of also encouraging people to get involved and say this is a recognized profession and it's so valuable. And I feel like that is often not given the value that it should.
Yeah, definitely, but I think it can't be given the value it should if every time we have that discussion, we expect people only to be volunteering to do it. That is wonderful that we have people
100%.
volunteering, but I'd much rather pay people to do it because it has a huge value, and therefore go, well, can we have some models that don't just rely on goodwill and big hearts? Because I think that does a massive disservice to the size of the problem and the benefit to society in actually valuing it properly and finding a model that will therefore remunerate people properly to be invested in it in every possible respect.
And just add to the big hearts and goodwill, it's the time and energy that needs the compensation as well, otherwise it's not sustainable. So amen to that.
Janine, I'd love to move on to you now. You have spoken a lot about men struggling with mental health, your own lived experience. How has that shaped your understanding of why these unstructured, low pressure third spaces are so healing, and especially for people who are dealing with anxiety, depression, mental health issues?
Sure. That's a great question. So I'm even thinking about what Paul was saying, because so many people are anxious, and let's say you ask them to be part of a panel. So I've done youth panels, so Gen Z, and sometimes people are very shy, but when they feel that it's a safe space for their voice to be heard, it gives them the confidence to speak up in other contexts of their life and other settings. And communication is a practice. I mean, for me, growing up, I was very anxious, very nervous speaking in front of my class for anything. And post-pandemic, there's a lot of people that were so comfortable being in their rooms with their phones, under their roof, that being back in person is so uncomfortable. And those phones are like a little comfort teddy bear. They're holding on to it. And Sophia, I'm sure you see this with your generation. So having those third spaces that are designed and developed by young people, if you have figured out what is their need, what is the need of your target audience, right? Well, they're lonely, they don't have hope, they're depressed, they want more social connection, they don't want to be lonely. So you build whatever it is you're building with their insights and give them the safe space, and you make it a very welcoming, ongoing, not a one-time thing where, I love what you said, Paul, like some old person is getting up there just talking at them. It's so important to never have any kind of experience where you're just talking at a generation that you really don't know anything about at the end of the day, right? So when I think about the insights that are so valuable from Gen Z, for example, you're missing out if you don't take into consideration their needs, their hopes, their desires, and just giving them an opportunity to take a break from whatever it is they're struggling with.
Was there a specific moment in your life where you realized that people needed a different kind of space just to exist, just to be together?
Definitely. I started a business called Outside the Box in 2021. And when I was finally able to be on a college campus, a university here in California, we would do activities that could be as simple as holding up a sign and saying, "How are you really?" And students would stop and some would cry. Some would come up to either myself or other students and they would need a hug. Or I would get flowers donated and I would have them put up a sign, "Free flowers." And they would say, "Really? We do not have to pay for this flower?" I said, "No, here's a flower." And they said, "You have no idea what I'm going through. Can I take one for my mother or my friend or my teacher?" And so those small acts of kindness in unexpected ways, we have lost our way as a society. We are so focused on achievement and technology that we're not dialing it back and thinking, how can we be kind and thoughtful and connected and look up? And if you see somebody struggling, go over and say, "Are you okay?" So to answer your question, I had a lot of moments over 4.5 years where students would cry that they were in conflict with their roommate or they were failing a test and they were thinking, "My parents are going to be so upset." Just ongoing stress and worry and we talk about they can see the whole world in their phone and just being nervous about what the future holds. So that's what really did it.
And it's losing that sort of sense of context, isn't it? When you're by yourself and you're not sharing your thoughts and experiences with other people, that it often then becomes way too much and you can't see the wood for the trees or the trees for the wood. I always
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and that's then the value then again of these third spaces, that maybe that normalizes things and you realize someone else is dealing with the same things that I'm dealing with, or this isn't something that I'm all by myself and I do have this. Can you tell us about these We Need Connection workshops that you've started? Because I love the fact that this, again, is just allowing people to come along and not have skills to come. They can just be themselves.
Sure. Well, I just want to, before I explain that, which will lead into that, I will say that creativity and the power of play are so important right now. And that's what we need to build. And so with that, I was trying to think over the 4 to 5 years, the work I was doing with Outside the Box with students and listening to them. Yes, we were sitting down, we were playing speed friending games, we were painting when they were very anxious sitting around a table to first play this card game to connect. I said, "Why don't we just paint?" And they would have to go to another table to ask for blue paint. And I specifically only gave them 3 or 4 colors, so they'd have to get up. So I thought about, okay, creativity works. What about something called We Need Connection? And it's KNEAD. And I did a pilot with a lot of 20-something students. And basically, it was me leading a workshop about how to make homemade bread. And it's not about perfection. It's also about thinking outside the box. Let's say you're vegan. You don't want eggs in your bread. Fine, you can do it your way. Let's say you don't like rosemary. Great, put some oregano or garlic. So it's about being creative, being open, not having to follow a very tight script, and having fun. So one of the things we do is I'll say, after I show them how to make the dough, I'll pull out dough that's already been rising for an hour and a half. I say, "Make any shape you want." And they kind of look at me. I said, "You can make a snowman. You can do whatever you want." So it's very playful. And then I also teach them how to make bagels and fill them with very untraditional flavors. You can fill it with, bananas and chocolate if you want to. And by the end, they gain a life skill. They've had a break. They've had some fun. They've met some new faces. And so We Need Connection has become this wonderful new initiative that I'm really excited about. And lastly, I use a flour. Anybody have you heard of 00 Italian flour? Okay, so
One
Penny,
nod, please. Jokes.
yes. So if you're sensitive to gluten, as I am, for some reason this flour doesn't bother you because it's less protein. Less protein. It's a softer wheat. So if you travel to Italy, as I have, I could eat all the bread I wanted as many times a day. Didn't bother me. So I thought, let me make this. So this is the only flour I use. Yeah.
I realized I was the only person nodding along because Waitrose used to be one of our clients when I was in advertising. So I was like, oh, yes, 00. Absolutely.
00. Yes.
But I'm just thinking again, then when you're talking about the creativity and the play, and that is what we see as well, time and time again at Tween Talk, is that is a nice way as well, that in that third space you have something that is common, that you're joining together to do something, but potentially or something that none of you do that often or haven't done before, and experimenting with that. And that is often when we have the most insightful truths and things that come out, and then people, they forget themselves, don't they, when they're involved doing
They
something.
do. And you forget how good it is to walk into a space and just with your senses to smell something that is so delicious and soothing. It's like when you smell lavender or whatever smell really relaxes you, and you can just take a pause and go, that's what I want to achieve. I want people to relax a bit more and connect with themselves and with other people.
I think, sorry, I think there's something really powerful there about bringing joy and creativity back into life. Everything at the moment is for convenience. So we order food online because we haven't got time to go shopping. And
yes,
that reduces the human connection of like chatting to the cashier or bumping into someone in an aisle and being like, oh, sorry, or oh, hello, haven't seen you for a while. It's constantly about convenience and making life easier for ourselves, which is important. But also there's something in kind of choosing to do things in a little bit of a complicated way, just because it brings you joy. So like making bread from scratch, even though there's lots of steps to it and it's labor intensive, you could just go out and buy bread. Of course you could. But if that brings you joy, if that process brings you joy, it's about taking the time. And I think it's about slowing down. And with our phones and social media, we're constantly contactable. Like it's constant. For example, like if a child was bullied at school, they of course would be bullied at school, and then they'd go home and they'd be somewhat safe and protected from that in their own home. Now, if a child is bullied at school, they go home and that bullying is done online through phones and through social media. Boundaries aren't as clear as they used to be, and like anyone can be contactable at any time, anywhere. And there's something about protecting your time and protecting your space and being like, actually, no, this is my time to paint or draw or bake bread or sit outside. Just kind of really going back to the basics, I guess, and reconnecting. And I think third spaces are so important to really give young people the safe environment to be able to do that and to be able to explore what they like and don't like, what they're into, what they're not into. I think especially after COVID, I think we all realized young people are our generation is the most connected generation on paper. We can talk to someone in Australia or in Nepal or in Vietnam, anywhere in the world. So on paper, we're the most connected, but we're also the loneliest.
Most disconnected.
That's right.
Well, it's that disconnect, and it's that lack of like meaningful connection. So it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, I have a friend who lives here and I have a friend who lives there. But when you need someone to talk to, when you're upset, when you're in crisis, who do you go to? Is it the friend?
Right.
And it might be the friend who you game with online who lives thousands of miles away. or it might be someone closer to home. I think there's a lot of nuance in this as well.
I think
I have a question.
Yes,
Oh, do you mind?
please.
How many times have you felt like you didn't want to go to an event? You thought, I'm not in the mood. All of you?
Yeah,
I feel like that very often. I get socially anxious, so you get all ready and you think, I don't feel like going. But then you push yourself and the most unexpected thing happens. You meet somebody new. Somebody says, I love your blouse, Sophia, that color. So it's the unexpected, and we're not nurturing our social health enough. And it's such a key component of our health that we've neglected it.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you said that, Janine. It was exactly what I was going to start to say, and it was triggered by Sophia saying time. And I think a lot of people, I'm going to speak positively. If the listeners here, if they can be motivated and encourage people to make the time just to step out a little bit of what you might already be doing, there's loads of ways you can make the time. Like, how long are you spending doing something which you don't need to be spending as long doing? Watching Netflix, scrolling social media, reading, if whatever, there is time in the day that we can make. We are all busy, and and then to your point, Janine, like we when we do it, it can then come into the effort. I get socially exhausted, and I'm not that social, but I sometimes the thought of having to go and socialize, and then it's fine. I have a great time. I love socializing. It fills my cup right back up. And it's like we've got to the social health element is about what you need as well in your your bucket, your cup, whatever analogy you want to use. And I think I hope people realize that there's great things out there, even if you just take the time to be curious about it, or look and maybe not make the decision yet, maybe leave that decisioning to another time, but just take that walk. So that all.
And that involvement can be different for everybody. Each person can choose what they can give, how much time they can offer, but just that little bit, can fundamentally make a difference. I wanted to ask all of you really quickly, and whoever would like to jump in, but what hope do you have about the future of community and connection, even though we're facing all these challenges? Sophia, would you like to start?
Of course. I think we saw glimpses of it during COVID, but I think people realizing the power in community, in talking to their neighbors, in being curious about making these little connections. I'm hopeful that people will, I guess, to a certain extent, revert back to the old ways and have that lovely sense of like community and neighborhood feel, because it's so beneficial. And I think it can exist in many different ways now, but you can have online and you can have in person. Both are equally as important.
What gives me hope is that when our tweens got to vote on that space, Jenny, and they were telling us how they didn't want a screen in sight, and then that they turn up, and then that they're yearning for, they want that connection. Paul, what about you?
Yeah, I feel pretty hopeful about it. I think for two reasons. One is I think we've tiptoed past peak bleak. And to me, the peak bleak, as I'd like to call it, is kind of when we didn't really know what we were being assaulted by, And I think if you went back 5-6 years ago, I don't think we had a sort of inkling, but any real sense of how deleterious the effects of social media and an over reliance on it was. And I think the scales have sort of fallen from our eyes, and a bit, it always reminds you of tobacco crisis going, I think I understand why I've been feeling wheezy for decades. And, so that's good, right? So if we're going to deal with it, at least we're all like, and not just, I think young people as well, the young people who come to Moot, our members, are really aware of it in a way that they just weren't 5, 6, 7 years ago. So that gives me reason for hopefulness, because there's an awareness and a desire, and you're seeing all sorts of counter trends now to, and IRL counter trends to the overall sort of digital sort of wash. But I guess my hopefulness is tempered by pragmatism, which is to say, I don't think we will just revert to our former selves. I think you still have to. Society needs to engineer these things to some degree, because if you're trying to create a Bond villain, and by the way, I think smartphones are really, and social media, there are a lot of things that it's also really good for, right? So I think it's also far too binary the way it's painted. It's amazing for connecting people and for connecting people from disparate groups or really niche groups. So there's lots to be said for it. But if you were a Bond villain trying to design something that you could control the planet with, and get them hooked on the most addictive device, you couldn't have done better to design. So we do have to be hopeful. We actually have to go, right, but we are going to grasp this and not just hope that somehow everyone will magically revert to some sort of prelapsarian state of,
and to spin it,
happiness.
Yeah, your marketing, background as well, as I've got a little bit of that as well. It's move it through the stages. You've got the awareness, people need to consider what they need to do, then they need to start moving towards the action as well. So
and it's going to take effort as well, fortunately.
And inspiration. And that's where what gives me hope is people like you and people, these conversations we're having. So I think that is, is part of it. But hopefully if one or two people move closer to what they're realizing that they need and can access, that would be great.
And Janine?
I would love to see more compassionate, kind people, more empathetic people, creating experiences that are social benefit experiences. So these third spaces where you even have intergenerational communities show up. So you have retirees with college students. You have, different experiences. You have these conversations and connections. And so we can learn to be more selfless and volunteer more and just use our knowledge and our skills and whatever we can bring to benefit others and just create a kinder world, because I feel like there's a lot of ways that we don't value one another. And I think we have to go old school and really get to know one another on a human level.
I love that.
I couldn't agree more. And I have a small confession to make. This is not that. It's not a real plot twist, so don't embrace yourself too much. But when you talked, Janine, about intergenerational, I totally agree with that. It's interesting. Cheryl and I set out to create Moot as a social space for teenagers, in a way that was funded by subscriptions and such. It turns out that it can't survive on that business model, and B, along the way we've realized we've actually created, when in the process of creating a much needed social space for teenagers, we've created a much needed social space for everyone else who comes to us and going, oh my god, this is amazing. And there's a place where you can sort of hang out, and so far, and certainly in the UK, that if you want a social space, it's pretty binary. You can go, there's pubs, and we've had pubs for ages, but it is very alcohol dependent, and they are quite traditional, and they're quite sticky floored. Or there are community halls and community spaces which tend to be quite dreary and not particularly inspiring. And suddenly there are people going, oh, you appear to have created something that is genuinely has cross-generational appeal. It's great that you do that thing for teenagers, because we love our young people, and it's amazing seeing community rally around that. But we're now using that space 4 days a week for all sorts of other people to come in and use it, and that serendipity of human connection, of bouncing, like Brownian motion, molecules bouncing into other random molecules. There's an energy here amongst us, right? So I totally agree with that, and I think the more that we can find spaces that are cross-generational and not just hinged on alcohol, because because lots of our societies are that's just not what I need every day of the week or at all. So
Yeah, or overpriced coffee and cake, where you have to go
Right.
somewhere and spend, a load of money just to socialize and catch up and connect with people you've had to pre-plan to do.
Mm-hmm.
So our tween question today is, why do adults always want us to be doing something? Is it not okay just to hang out sometimes? Paul.
no, it's not. You must be doing useful things that well, I don't know. Yes, because that's what parents do. I think there's two things with this. One is because because the devil makes work for idle hands is such a wonderful saying, and so therefore it just winkles its way into your subconscious and makes you believe it. But I think parents, there's such a fear amongst parents of your child not to go back to the achievement conversation, not achieving in life. And with a very narrow view of achievement. And therefore, if you are going to achieve, every spare moment of your life must be doing something that will be edifying or help you to succeed. And things that fall into that camp are playing bassoon or doing pliés and jetés and all that sort of stuff. And so I think the reason is that parents are terrified of the wrong things. And really what they should be most terrified about is a child that has no social confidence and doesn't know how to be comfortable around other children, and then they will turn into an adult that is terrified and low on social confidence and is not comfortable around other adults. So yeah, that's my unscientific take on.
May I add to that?
Yeah.
I think, first of all, I was a horrible student. I mean, the only thing I was good at was writing at 15, creative writing, because my teacher said there are no wrong answers. I think one of the worst things a parent could do is to not allow time to just decompress, to lie outside on a picnic blanket and look up at the clouds and listen to music. To be overprogrammed is very stressful. And so a child without life skills, hobbies, interests that they decide, not the parent says you must, that they can find their way in the world with these hobbies. That could lead to a career. Because of 15-year-old me and my teacher, Mrs. Katie, I found that that was something I really loved to do, and it had stayed with me, but I was given the space to just explore. And I think we need to do that more with kids, to put less pressure. But I know some parents want them to get into the best school and achieve and do. And at the end of the day, when they're not with their parents, they're going to go off to college and do whatever they want, probably to an extreme extent, because they don't have those barriers. So
I also wonder if it's how we all are, that we're all doing something all the time. There's always something that we should be doing, right?
yes.
That is also trickling down how society's become. We're never switching off. And I think that's also relevant to any generation. Sophia, what about you?
Really interesting question. I think similar to what you said about kind of the way the world works at the moment, everything is centered on productivity and it's all very capitalist. And sometimes we just need to let people just be. One of the most powerful exercises I've done is literally just sitting in silence. And it is so fascinating how quickly I get uncomfortable. And then just sitting with that discomfort and being like, okay, yeah, this is the feeling. And I think young people should be given that time and that space to be able to do that too, however whatever that looks like for them. Obviously it's about balance, but I think the time spent just hanging out sometimes is just as important as the time spent going to swimming class or learning to play an instrument. It's all vital and it's all important and it all needs to be given time.
And that might be where the most creativity, the best ideas come from, when you're
absolutely.
When you're not creating. Yes.
Exactly. Thank you so much. As we wrap up today's conversation, here's a simple truth. Third spaces matter because people matter. These spaces are here to remind us that we don't have to go through life alone. It can be a youth club, a community cafe, a shared creative space, or just somewhere to sit quietly without having to explain yourself. What they all give us is something rare these days: room to breathe, to reflect, and to belong. Connection doesn't have to be flashy or performative. Sometimes it's just showing up, even if you're not saying much. Sometimes it's listening more than talking. And sometimes it's knowing there's a place where you're welcome exactly as you are. To our guests, Sophia, Paul, and Janine, thank you for the work you do, for holding these spaces, and for the quiet ways you show up for others. And to our listeners, thank you for being here, for listening, and for caring. Your presence matters. If today's episode has resonated with you, we'd love you to share it with someone who might need it, leave us a review, or simply take a moment to reflect on what third spaces look like in your own life and how you might support or protect them. We're Penny and Jenny, and this has been Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. Keep listening, keep showing up where you can. Even an hour can make a difference. And as always, keep informing those perspectives.